Good morning, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. You know, one of the things we always discuss is being on theme. And I can't think of many bigger themes in the world than wellness over the last decade, let's call it. And one subsector of wellness is medical marijuana, cannabis. Whatever you want to say, positives, negatives, there's a lot of striation of opinions. Certainly, it's an area worth exploring and part of the whole wellness trend. And also, whenever you're playing something that's new, there's always uncertainty. But one of the ways to de-risk uncertainty is with diversification. And we're very lucky today to be joined by Michael Curtis of MMJ, and they run a portfolio of cannabis companies, which makes them a little bit different. And more to talk about that is Michael himself. Michael, welcome to 18 Minutes with 180 Markets.
Thanks, Greg. Pleasure to be here today.
Great. Hey, Michael, you know, everyone has a story. Can you just tell us your story? How did you get to where you are today?
I'm happy to tell the story, and I can probably guarantee it's a little bit different than most people in the cannabis industry. So Originally, I was a clinician working in one of the research department, orthopedic department for one of the largest hospitals based here in Canada. I transitioned from that role off to university to do my MBA and graduate work, and then became a banker. And I worked globally at that point in time for groups such as RBC Dominion Securities, Lehman Brothers, and Canaccord Genuity. And my focus really was on big cap pharma, big cap biotech, and the healthcare space in general, just based on my background and my science background. For me, the cannabis industry was in the early stages, something that I truly didn't understand until I met a gentleman named Greg Boone. He was starting a company called Dosecan. And what Dosecan was it was an extraction company. So extraction within the cannabis space is you take biomass of some sort, you squeeze out all the goodness, and then you produce a variety of other products out of it. So whether they be vapes, tinctures, etc. But basically, from my perspective, which produces pharmaceutical-like products. I was lucky enough to understand it quickly and understand the bottleneck, and so founded Dosecan. We sold that to a group called Cannabis Wheaton, based here in North America. And post that, I started another company called Embark Health, which is a very large extraction company we can talk to later. And through my role with Dosecan, MMJ had been our lead investor. They asked me to become a board member, and following that, I transitioned into the advisory role of running the portfolio as well as running operational companies.
Amazing. So you really do bring, what I think is also interesting is you bring that medical side, but also that finance side, and you marry them up. And, you know, maybe, we'll touch into it in a moment, how that fits, you know, specifically into MMJ, but can you just talk us through a little bit industry-wide? How has the industry been affected by COVID? Every industry is, but can you just talk 100%. A little bit more for?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take people back for a second and kind of explain before we got to COVID, because it was also an interesting time. So what you saw in Canada, and you're seeing the exact same thing playing out in Australia, is the medicinal cannabis is really the leader of this sector. What that requires is you need to build a fair amount of infrastructure around that, especially related to the grows. Those are your most expensive grows and most costly assets to build. Within Canada, we've gradually moved into greenhouses and outdoor grows. So the regulatory burden has become less, and the really early adopters were almost penalized because they have these really high cost assets that they can't work. What that led to was exceptionally high expectations, but the sales, profit, etc. of the financial side of it really didn't come through. So leading from probably 2019 January, you saw a pretty difficult bear market for a variety of the licensed producers, the LPs out there. And it was a tough environment. You saw rationalization across costs. You saw projects getting shut down. So by the time we entered January, we were deep into 12 or 18 months of a bear market. So most of the companies had made a lot of changes to either reduce costs or increase profitability. Entering January, the companies were really starting to produce reasonable results, and then COVID hit and shut everything down. from the cannabis sector, both in Canada and the United States, these businesses were labeled essential. So that meant that they kept going through the process. Here within Canada, we saw sales actually increasing through this, and companies that had entered doing, I'm just using round numbers, let's call it 100,000 in sales, are now doing 3, 4, and 500,000 in sales. So from our perspective, the pandemic really just addressed very battle-hardened, profitable companies, and now is really torquing and accelerating the growth of those companies as supply is surging. The number of people that are using cannabis is increasing dramatically to deal with stress and other wellness issues. And we're seeing just the platform across North America increase dramatically. So all the black market folks that use that industry are transitioning over. And you're seeing that in the States of some of the early adopters like Colorado. You've really seen sales take off and then plateau, but now they're taking off into a whole second leg. So it looks like this market is just dramatically increasing here.
That's great. That's great. And also, do you think that maybe, with the seminal, regulatory events of like loosening up, and certainly in the U.S. On various states, there was like a digestion period, and now we're kind of into that, I don't know if you call it the second or third inning, where people, are a little, more comfortable.
So what we're seeing in the United States is the Farm Act came into play last year, which is effectively the federal government opining on just CBD, so within cannabis, you have CBD and you have THC. CBD has no psycho effects. It's really just for health, wellness. It's part of the endocannabinoid system that's fed by mother's milk, funny enough, in your early days. So what we've seen with that is they've come out with a general bill. Now you're seeing the FDA, they're going to come out with, this is CBD, this is what it can be used for, this is what the research is. So that's step one. Step two, it's been labeled an essential industry by states, and it's been allowed to run through the COVID. So our assumption is 2021, 2022, you're going to see full legalization in the United States across CBD and THC. So that's going to be a massive boom, I think. And that's really being driven by both, the whole pandemic situation, the loss of tax revenues, and just a general understanding that, cannabis is probably one of the best things that people can be taking for stress out there.
Right. And so, with anything new, we are on the upswing now, but what I think is interesting, more digging into MMJ specifically, is you have taken a portfolio approach to the industry and to your business model. Can you just discuss, for those that don't understand your business, how you have taken it on board?
Yeah. So I think originally within the cannabis industry, a lot of money was dedicated to grow operations. So originally those medicinal operations and then scaling those up bigger. At MMJ, we took a different approach. So we focused on a variety of things that we thought were going to be important later on. So the first thing was extraction. So we were the lead investor for DoseCan. We were the largest investor for a company called MediPharm, and we're the largest investor for Embark. Extraction is really the bottleneck that you see within the cannabis industry. So it goes from, unless you want to smoke dried cannabis, every single other product that comes out of it is post-extraction. So it squeezes the goodness out of the cannabis and or hemp and puts it into vapes, it puts it into tinctures, etc. So this area from our perspective has been exceptionally profitable, has almost pharma-like margins, and allows us to really stabilize the base of MMJ in terms of revenue. We also focused on brands. We think brands longer term are going to really be what drives sales. There's no true established brands. So as we use the portfolio of MMJ, we're pushing these brands globally to ensure that those are going to be surviving and some of the quality brands that we have out there. So we've taken both what we believe is the lowest risk in terms of, spending the least amount of money to get the highest return. So the highest return in extraction, the highest return in brands. These are all very highly profitable areas, as opposed to the grow operations that you see, which are really just becoming more and more commoditized as you move from medicinal to greenhouses to outdoor grows. So we've stayed away from anything that's commoditized and focused within the industry on high value bottleneck things that we think are going to go longer term.
Right. And can you just discuss for those maybe at a high level, if you will, extraction, what does it exactly mean?
Sure. So extraction essentially within, so let's just use cannabis as an example. Within cannabis, you have cannabinoids and terpenes. So if you smoke that dried cannabis, you will get the impact of all that. What we try to do, and really the market that we're trying to address is more young to middle-aged professionals who like to use cannabis either on a regular or not regular basis, but want it in a form that's easy to use, dose specific. So what we'll do is we'll take in that dried cannabis, we'll extract it. So you can extract from a solvent perspective or solventless, and we won't get into that, but two different ways. And out of that, you'll get a product that you can put into edibles, into vapes and other things. And that's what we find, generally people want to use. It's clean, it's easy, it's doesn't have the stigma that people are associated with smoking dried cannabis.
Right. No, that's really helpful. And then also within the MMJ portfolio, can you just discuss the big positions, the big value drivers, Harvest One, Embark, and whatever else
Sure.
you think is interesting?
Yeah, so we inherited a few positions when we took this over. Harvest One was one of those positions that has had a tough time, but it looks like it's turning the corner and selling some assets and moving to profitability. And what it's going to do is it's essentially going to be a distribution and product company going forward. They've got massive contracts and good products, including things like Dream Water that they can sell off. So Harvest One has thankfully made it through a pretty difficult time and looks like it's coming out the other side and going to be exceptionally profitable. Embark Health, for example, is a large scale extraction company. We focused on 7 different modalities of extraction just because you never know what's going to show up on your doorstep on a daily basis. And, all extraction is not the same. So you need to be able to extract things in different ways and provide different products. And at the same time, you need to be large scale. So Embark right now has got its license, it started selling, it's ramping up. And for MMJ and all the portfolio companies, it's just going to be an engine and producer of brands and high quality product that we can then push out to these portfolio companies and assist them in any way possible. So it's really going to be a big engine for the portfolio over the next 12 months and probably a huge performer as well, because assuming market conditions kind of stay stable, we'll take this company public probably September, October of this year.
Okay, great. And so with Harvest One, then I at some point would that be completely restructured or sold off in your opinion? And I'll let you.
So our expectation is the restructuring should be done kind of August, September of this year. They've got a variety of deals and they're working with the special committee. Post all that happening, I think you'll probably see a rebranding, and as the end of the year, early next comes out, you'll see a new company, products, etc. My expectation is that within our portfolio, we can probably help that company and produce additional products through Embark, etc. that should accelerate that growth. And that's really, not only do our investors benefit from the fact that you get diversification across the portfolio, as these companies become more mature, they can start to assist others under commercially reasonable terms, but they can accelerate each other. So our portfolio companies tend to work pretty closely when and where they can, just to do what they can in these challenging times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it sounds like the next 2 to 6 months, there's going to be a huge amount of news flow out of the company, out of MMJ in general.
100%. And I think what investors need to realize is the cannabis sector is like any other sector that got an overcapacity issue, whether it's the tech sector back in the 2000s or the real estate sector. It blows off. And then eventually you have 4 or 5 big companies that are the leaders and a variety of other high quality ones. We can tell now who's going to win and who's not going to be participating a year from now. Our companies are all going to accelerate. They've all turned profitable, and we're actually highly bullish. We also think that the cannabis sector in general is really starting to chew through that overcapacity issue. We think the end of the year on the demand side is going to be highly positive, and we think 2021 for cannabis sector stocks is going to be true outperformance. And you've seen that cyclically in all these, it's about 18 months to blow it off. We've seen the iterations in terms of the companies reducing costs, etc. We're starting to hear rumbles about sort of an M&A cycle starting to take place with Aphria and Aurora meeting. So eventually you're going to see that start to happen, and these companies are just going to get taken up, right? And we've really managed to make sure that our assets are highly attractive in that situation, both from a profitability so they can stand alone, but they also bolt really nicely into larger and or smaller companies, really.
Right, because obviously, as you know, anyone that's been around and seen some cycles go up and down a bit, the weaker companies, inevitably, they just go away. And as you said, there's an emergence of like 4 or 5 real dominating leaders that have maybe, I wouldn't have been surprised if there were 50 companies at one point a year ago, and they realized it's not quite so simple. One of the keys to getting around the corner, though, is to get to the corner. Can you just talk about the balance sheet and the cash position?
Yep. So we through the COVID deployed capital to make sure all of our portfolio companies, Harvest and some others, had the capital they needed to get through. We're actually starting to see that money come back to us now in a pretty organized process. So I reckon by the end of September-ish, we'll have $4 to $5 million sitting on the balance sheet. Embark Health is going to be going public within that time frame, so we'll see a fair amount of liquidity there. And I think we'll see the end of the Harvest One restructuring process. So those 3 things, my expectation are they probably quantify our existing value right now. And then we have a number of really great companies that are doing exceptionally well, such as WeedMD, WeedMe, Valero, and others that are, generating sales, and they're out there. So 100%, we feel pretty confident as we end the summer here, and we think 2021 is really going to be a massive outperformance year. So for folks looking to buy stocks, we're literally trading at a massive discount to NAV. But more importantly, you can tell that the news flow and the other stuff is going to quantify that value pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then also, obviously you come from a banking background, but are you more focused on M&A or more focused on just driving portfolio company performance, if you will? Not that they have to be mutually exclusive.
So our view is that all of our companies need to be standalone and profitable, but at the same time, that generally makes them relatively attractive and scalable to big companies. So as long as we continue to focus on the extraction, brands, etc. space, those items are all super scalable, and they can fit into bigger small entities. So you can expand them quickly with capital, or you can just continue to harvest the profitability of them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Michael, thank you very much for this time, for this short interview, but to give people a high level view of what's going on in the industry and specifically with MMJ, I think it's really exciting. And as you said, it's almost like the pain has been taken already. You're looking at now at the other side of the mountain, if you will.
100% agree. I used to have dark brown hair 12 months ago. So, it's been interesting for sure, but we're finally not calling each other wondering what the next bomb is going to drop. It is all just really good news, right? So we're super excited about the next 12 months.
Well, Michael, thank you very much, and we're really glad to share the journey with you, and please keep us updated.
Sounds great. Happy to come back anytime.
Okay, bye-bye.